Ba ba da ba da 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 ba da ba da ba ba da. Oh, okay. All right. I will be reading for at least 30 minutes. Here's the book, Kokoro by Natsume Soseki. I was supposed to read yesterday. Ended up not doing it because I just wasn't really feeling it. Hold on, let me turn off my light. Oh, man. Even when the night changes. Okay. Okay. Chapter 78. Aware that, under Okusan's kind treatment, I myself had grown cheerful, I set about applying the same process to Kay. From my long acquaintance with him, I was all too aware of how different we were. But just as my own nerves had relaxed considerably since I'd moved into this household, I felt surely Kay's heart, too, would eventually grow calmer here. Kay's will was far steelier than mine. He studied twice as hard, and his mind was a good deal finer. I cannot speak for the later years, when we chose different areas of study, but in the middle and high school years, while we were classmates, he was consistently ahead of me. I used to feel, in fact, that Kay would best me in everything, but in convincing the stubborn Kay to move in with me, I was sure I was showing more good sense than he. He failed to understand the difference between patience and endurance, I felt. Please listen carefully now. I am saying this for your benefit. All our capacities, both physical and mental, require external stimuli for both their development and their destruction. And in either case, these stimuli must be increased by slow degrees in order to be effective. But this gradual increase creates a very real danger that not only you yourself, but those around you may fail to notice any problems that might develop. Doctors tell us that a man's stomach is a thoroughly rebellious creature, inclined to misbehave. If you feed it nothing but soft gruel, it will lose the power to digest anything heavier. So they instruct us to train it by feeding it all manner of foods. I don't think this is just a matter of getting it used to the variety, however. I interpret it to mean that the stomach's resilience gradually increases as the stimuli build up over time. Now imagine what would happen if the stomach instead grew steadily weaker under this regimen. Kay was in just such a situation. Now Kay was a greater man than I, but he failed to comprehend what was happening to him. He had decided that if he accustomed himself to hardship, then pain would sooner or later cease to register. The simple virtue of repetition of pain, he was sure, would bring him to a point where pain no longer affected him. In order to bring about a change of heart in Kay, it was this, above all, that I would have to clarify to him. But if I spelled it out, he would doubtless resist. He would bring up the example of those Stoics and saints of old in his defense, I knew, and I would then have to point out the difference between them and him. That would be worthwhile if he were of a mind to listen to me, but by nature, once an argument reached that point, he would stick to his guns. He would simply assert his own position more vehemently, and having once spoken, he would feel obliged to follow through with action. In this respect, he was quite intimidating. He was grand in his convictions. He would stride forward to meet his own destruction. In retrospect, the only thing that had any kind of grandeur, was the resultant ruin of any hope of success. But there was certainly nothing run-of-the-mill about the process, at any rate. Knowing his temperament as I did, therefore, I couldn't utter a word. My sense that he was close to a nervous breakdown also made me hesitate. Even if I did manage to convince him, it would only agitate him further. I didn't mind quarreling, but I remembered how poorly I had withstood my own sense of isolation, and I couldn't bear to think of placing my friend in a similar situation, let alone exacerbating it. And so, even after bringing him into the house, I held back from voicing any real criticism. I decided to simply wait calmly to see what effect his new environment would have on him. Chapter 79. Behind his back, I asked Okusan and Ojo-san to talk to Kei as much as possible, convinced that the silence of his previous life had been the cause of his ruin. It seemed clear to me that his heart had rusted like iron from disuse. Okusan laughed, remarking that he was rather curt and unapproachable, and Ojo-san supported this by describing an encounter she had had with him. She'd asked him if his brazier was lit, and he had told her it wasn't. She offered to bring some charcoal, but he said he didn't need any. Wasn't he cold? She asked. He replied curtly that he was, but didn't want a fire, and he refused to discuss the matter further. I couldn't simply dismiss her story with a rueful smile. I felt sorry for her, and that I must somehow make up for his rudeness. It was spring, of course, so he had no real need for a warm fire in the brazier, but I could see that they had good reason to feel that he was difficult. I then did my best to use myself as a catalyst to bring them together. At every opportunity, I encouraged Kei to spend time in the company of all three of us. When I was walking with him, I would call them in, or when I met up with them in one of the rooms, I'd invite him to join us. Naturally, Kei did not much care for this. Sometimes he would abruptly rise to his feet and walk out. At other times, he ignored my calls. "What's the point of all that idle chatter?" he asked me. I just laughed, but I was well aware that he despised me for indulging in such frivolities. In some ways, I doubtless deserved his scorn. His sights were fixed on far higher images than mine. His sights were fixed on far higher things than mine. I'll not deny it. But it is surely crippling to limp along, so out of step with the lofty gaze you insist on maintaining. My most important task, I felt, was somehow to make him more human. Filling his own head with the examples of impressive men was pointless, I decided, if it did not make him impressive himself. As a first step in the task of humanizing him, I would introduce him to the company of the opposite sex. Letting the fair winds of that gentle realm blow upon him would cleanse his blood of the rust that clogged it, I hoped. This approach gradually succeeded. The two elements, which had seemed at first so unlikely to merge, slowly came together until they were one. Kei apparently grew to realize that there were others in the world besides himself. One day he remarked to me that women were not, after all, such despicable creatures. He had first assumed, he told me, that women had the same level of knowledge and academic ability as I had, and when he discovered that they didn't, he had been quick to despise them. He had always viewed men and women without any distinction, he said, without understanding that one could see the sexes differently. I pointed out that if we two men were to go on talking exclusively to each other forever, we would simply continue in the same straight line. Naturally, he replied. I spoke as I did because I was by then quite in love with Ojo-san, but I did not breathe a word to him of my inner state. This man, who had constructed a defensive fortress of books to hide behind, was now slowly opening up to the world, and the change in his heart delighted me. Opening him up had been my plan all along, and its success sent an irrepressible wave of joy through me. Though I said nothing of it to him, I shared my joy with Okusan and Ojo-san. They too seemed gratified. Chapter 80. Although Kay and I were in the same faculty, our fields of study were different, which meant that we came and went at different times. If I returned home early, I could simply pass through his empty room to reach my own. If he got home before I did, I always acknowledged him briefly before going on into my room. As I came through the door, Kay would glance up from his book and invariably say, "Just back, are you?" Sometimes I'd nod, and sometimes I'd simply give a grunt of assent. One day on my way home, I had reason to stop in at Kanda, so I returned much later than usual. I hurried to the front gate, and the lattice door clattered as I thrust it open. At that moment, I heard Ojo-san's voice. I was sure it came from Kei's room. The sitting room and Ojo-san's room lay straight ahead through the entrance hall, while our two rooms were off to the left, and by now I had become attuned to deciphering the location of voices. Just as I hastened to close the lattice door, her voice ceased. While I was removing my shoes, I now wore fashionable Western lace-ups. Not a sound emerged from Kay's room. This struck me as odd. Had I been mistaken? But when I opened the sliding doors as usual to pass through Kay's room, I found the two of them sitting there. "Just back, are you?" said Kay, as always. "Welcome home," Ojo-san said, remaining seated. For some reason, her straightforward greeting struck me as slightly stiff and formal. The tone had somehow a natural ring to my ears. "Where's Okusan?" I asked her. The question had no real significance. It was just that the house seemed unusually hushed. Okusan was out, and the maid had gone with her. Kay and Ojo-san, therefore, were alone in the house. This puzzled me. I had lived there a long time by now, but Okusan had never left me alone in the house with Ojo-san. Had she had urgent business to attend to? I inquired. Ojo-san simply laughed. I disliked women who laugh in response that way. All young ladies do it, of course, but Ojo-san had a tendency to laugh at silly things. When she saw my face, however, her usual expression quickly returned. There had been nothing urgent, she replied. Okusan had just gone out on a small errand. As a lodger, I had no right to press the matter further. I held my tongue. No sooner had I changed my clothes and settled down than Okusan and the maid returned. At length, the time came for us to all face one another over the evening meal. When I had first moved in as a lodger, they had treated me much like a guest. The maid serving dinner in my room, but this formality had broken down, and these days I was invited in to eat with the family. When Kay arrived, I insisted that he too be brought in for meals. In return, I donated to the household a light and elegant dining table of thin wood with foldable legs. These days, one can find tables like this in any household, but back then there were almost no homes where everyone sat around such a thing to eat. I had gone especially to a furniture shop in Ochanomizu and ordered it made to my specifications. As we sat at the table that day, Okusan explained that the fish seller had failed to call at the usual hour, so she had to go into town to buy our evening's food. Yes, I thought, that seems quite reasonable, given that she has guests to feed. Seeing my expression, Ojo-san burst out laughing, but her mother's scolding quickly put an end to it. Chapter 81. A week later, I again passed through the room where Ojo-san and Kay were talking there together. This time, she laughed as soon as she caught sight of me. I should have asked then and there what she found so humorous. But I simply went past them to my own room without speaking. Kay thus missed his chance to come out with his usual greeting. Soon I heard Ojo-san open the sliding doors and go back to the sitting room. That evening at dinner, she remarked that I was an odd person. Once again, I failed to ask the reason. I did not notice, however, that Okusan sent a hard stare in Ojo-san's direction. After dinner, Kay and I went for a walk. We went behind Zen, Denzuin Temple, and around the botanical gardens, emerging below Tomizaka. It was a long walk, but we spoke very little. Kei was temperamentally a man of even fewer words than I. I was not a great talker, but as we walked, I did my best to engage him in conversation. My main focus of concern was the family in whose house we were lodging. I asked him what he thought of Okusan and Ojo-san. He was quite impossible to pin down on the subject, however. He not only avoided the point, but his responses were extremely brief. He seemed far more interested in the topic of his studies than in the two ladies. Our second-year exams were almost upon us, I admit, so from any normal point of view, he was behaving much more typically than I. He launched into a disquisition on Swedenborg that made my uneducated mind reel. We both passed our exam successfully, and Okusan congratulated us on entering our final year. Her own daughter, her sole pride and joy, was soon to graduate as well. Kei remarked to me that girls emerged from their schooling knowing nothing. Clearly, he chose to completely overlook Ojo-san's extracurricular study of sewing, koto playing, and flower arranging. Laughing, I countered with my old argument that a woman's value did not lie in scholarly accomplishment. While he did not refute this statement outright, he did not seem willing to accept it either. That pleased me. I interpreted this casual dismissal of my ideas as an indication that his former scorn of women had not changed. Ojo-san, whom I thought the embodiment of womanly excellence, was evidently still beneath his voice. In retrospect, I see that my jealousy of Kei was already showing its horns. I suggested that the two of us go away together, somewhere during the summer vacation. He responded with apparent reluctance. It's true that he could not afford to go wherever he wanted, but on the other hand, nothing prevented him from accepting an invitation to travel with me. I asked why he didn't want to come. He replied that there was no real reason, he simply preferred to stay at home and read. When I contended that it would be healthier to spend the summer studying in some cooler place out of the city, he suggested I go on my own. I wasn't inclined to leave Kei there in the house alone, however. His growing intimacy with the two ladies was disturbing enough already. Needless to say, it was ridiculous for me to be so upset over a situation that I had gone out of my way to engineer in the first place. I was clearly being foolish. Okusan, tired of seeing us endlessly at cross purposes, stepped in to mediate. The result was that we decided the two of us would go off to the Boshu Peninsula together. Hello, I finally didn't miss it. What's up, opening? Alright, chapter 82. Kei seldom took trips, and I had never been to Boshu, so we both disembarked at the boat's first port of call, in complete ignorance of the place. Its name was Hota, I remember. I don't know what it might be like today, but in those days it was a dreadful little fishing village. For one thing, the whole place stank of fish. For another, when we tried sea bathing, the waves knocked us off of our feet, and our arms and legs were soon covered in scratches and grazes from the fist-sized rocks that were forever tumbling around in the water with us. I soon had enough of the place. Kei, however, said not a word either for or against it. Judging from his expression at least, he seemed quite unperturbed, although he never emerged from a swim without a bruise or a cut. I finally persuaded him to leave Hoda and move on to Tomiura. From there we went to Nako. All that part of the coast was a popular vacation place for students in those days. and we found beaches to our liking wherever we went. Kay and I often sat on a rock gazing out at the sea's colors, or at the underwater world at our feet. The water below us was beautifully crystal clear. In the transparent waves, we could point out to each other the brilliant flashes of little fish, whose vivid reds and blues were more spectacular than anything to be seen in the fish markets. I frequently read while sitting on the rocks, while Kay spent most of his time sitting silently. Was he lost in thought, or gazing at the scene before him, or intent on some happy fantasy? I had no idea. Occasionally, I glanced up and asked what he was doing. Nothing, he replied simply. I often thought how pleasant it would be if Ojo-san, rather than Kay, were sitting there beside me. This was all very well, but I sometimes felt a stab of suspicion that Kay might be thinking the same thing. Whenever this occurred to me, I found I could no longer sit calmly reading. I rose abruptly to my feet and let out a great, unrestrained yell. I couldn't dispel my pent-up feelings in a civilized manner, such as blandly declaiming some poem or song. All I could do was howl like a savage. Once, I grabbed Kay by the scruff of the neck and demanded to know what he would do if I tossed him into the sea. Kay remained motionless. Good idea. Go right ahead, he replied without turning. I quickly let go. The state of his nerves by now seemed to have considerably improved, while my own peace of mind had disintegrated. I observed his calm demeanor with envy, and with loathing, interpreting it as indifference to me. His serenity smacked of self-confidence, and not of a kind that it pleased me to see in him. My growing suspicions now demanded clarification of just what lay behind his self-assurance. Had his optimism about his chosen goals in life suddenly revived? If so, then we had no collision of interests. Indeed, it would have pleased me to think I had helped him on his way. But if his calm originated in his feelings for Ojo-san, this I could not countenance. Strangely, he seemed oblivious to the signs that I myself loved her, though needless to say, I was anything but eager to alert him to my feelings. Quite simply, he was constitutionally insensitive to such things. Indeed, it had been in the faith that no such problems would arise that I had brought him into the house in the first place. Chapter 83. Summoning up my courage, I decided to confess to Kay what was in my heart. It was not the first time I had reached this decision. It had been my plan since before our trip together, in fact, but so far I had had the skill neither to seize an appropriate moment nor to create one. It strikes me now that the people I knew back then were all a bit peculiar. No one around me ever spoke about private matters of the heart. No doubt, quite a few had nothing to confide, but even those who did kept silent. This must seem most peculiar to you, in the relative freedom of your present age. I will leave it to you to judge whether it was a lingering effect from the Confucianism of an earlier time, or simply a form of shyness. On the face of it, Kay and I could say anything to each other. Questions of love and romance did occasionally come up, but our discussions around them always descended into abstract theory, and were in any case rare. For the most part, our conversations were confined to the subject of books and study, our future work, our aspirations, and self-improvement. As close as we were, it was difficult to break into these rigid, impersonal discussions with a personal confession. High-minded gravity was integral to our intimacy. I do not know how often I squirmed with impotent frustration at my inability to speak my heart as I had resolved to do. I longed to crack open some part of Kay's mind and soften him with a breath of gentler air. To your generation, this will seem quite absurd, but for me at the time, it constituted a huge difficulty. I was the same coward on vacation as I had been back home. Though constantly alert for a chance to make my confession, I could find no way to break Kay's determined aloofness. His heart might as well have been sealed off with a thick coating of hard black liquor, it seemed to me, repelling every drop of the warm-blooded feeling that I was intent on pouring upon it. Sometimes, though, I found Kay's fiercely principled stance toward the world reassuring. Then I would regret ever doubting him and silently apologizing for my suspicions. In this state of mind, I seemed a deeply inferior person and suddenly despised myself. But then the same old doubts would sweep back in and reassert themselves with renewed force. Since I deduced everything on the basis of suspicion, all my conclusions cast me in a disadvantageous light. It seemed to me that Kay was handsomer and more attractive to women than I, and that my fussiness made my personality less appealing to the opposite sex. His combination of firm manliness with something a little absurd also struck me as superior. Nor did I find myself a match for him in scholarly ability, although, of course, our fields differed. With all of his advantages so constantly before my eyes, any momentary relief from my fears soon reverted to the old anxieties. Observing my restlessness, Kay suggested that if I didn't like it here, we might as well go back to Tokyo. But as soon as he said this, I wanted to stay after all. What I actually wanted was to prevent him from going back himself, I think. We plodded on around the tip of the peninsula, miserably roasting in the painful rays of the hot sun and plagued by the notorious local habit of understanding distances when we asked our way. I can no longer see any point in going on walking like this, and said as much half-jokingly to Kay. We're walking because we have legs, he replied. Whenever the heat grew too much for us, we took a dip in the sea wherever we happened to be. But when we set off again, the sun was just as fierce, and we grew limp with fatigue. All right, that'll be it for today. My plan is to read a little bit tomorrow on stream.